Hello and welcome to the Tucson Bitcoin podcast. Today I have on Robert Allen Pepiton, who is the treasurer of the Arizona Libertarian Party. He's ran for office here in Arizona 4 times, and yeah, we had an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed this one. I've been really trying to dive deep into local politics and learn about the political scene here in Arizona. Partially because I feel like influencing local government into accepting Bitcoin friendly laws is good, but before I can start lobbying, I'd have to talk to and understand the political scene a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. He's got a really good view on it as far as like how the two-party system really, you know, just seeks to eliminate any sort of competition. And the local Arizona Republicans have made it very difficult for libertarians to run on the ticket. And that goes for the same anywhere, there's a dominant party and there's a third party that they deem as a threat of taking votes away from them. They'll make it very difficult for them to get on the ballot. We saw that with the Green Party this year, where the Democrats really, on a national level, really tried to get them off of the ballots nationally, and they weren't able to get on every state's ballot, which is just, kind of a major bummer. Personally, I am very anti-politics. Like, it just drives me insane, but to a certain degree, it affects our lives, and I think it's something that, for me, I've wanted to learn more about, and I'm excited about what's going on with the local Arizona Libertarian Party. I was able to go to a Joe Jorgensen rally and meet some people, and it was a lot of fun. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this interview and have a good one. All right, we're recording. Good to have you on, Robert.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Alex.
So, yeah, it's awesome to have you here. So you're the treasurer of the Arizona Libertarian Party. How long have you been doing that for?
So I was just elected to my third term. So just over, touch over 4 years. Each term is 2 years long. So this will be, when I wrap this one up, it'll be 6.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to getting involved with the Arizona Libertarian Party?
So believe it or not, it was a Democrat, and it started, but not even involving politics. In my area, I live in a little suburb of Phoenix called Levine, and we have a little community barbecue every year that helps raise some money for some organizations. And I was complaining about how it wasn't as good as it used to be. And a family friend of ours happened to be on the board for that organization and said, well, what are you doing to fix it? And that just sparked something in me. And so I started getting more involved. And that ultimately led to, going to county party meetings and meeting, a lot of the people who are currently serving as officers, and just getting involved. So that really pushed me. That was, a solid 2 years before I ever went to a county party meeting, but I knew that was part of it, right? To get out from behind the computer and to actually try and make a difference. So that was really the drive, was a Democrat saying, what are you doing to fix it? And me saying, oh shit, I'm sorry, am I allowed to, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say, because okay. I was like, oh shit, I'm not really doing anything other than trolling on the internet. I'm not doing any much more than posting memes, right? Like, and so that really pushed me to get more involved.
Gotcha. Well, to be fair, we can't discount the power that memes have in shaping.
For sure. It's the modern, memes are just the modern political cartoon, right? Like, newspapers are pretty much dead. Social media is taken over. And so instead of having the traditional political cartoon, the political cartoonist, you have internet memes. And oh my gosh, like, first of all, people understand it because it's culturally outside of just politics too, and so people get, they're easy to understand and accept what a meme is outside of inside or outside of politics.
Yeah. Yeah, I just remember in 2016 all the memes that were coming out with Trump, and the one of him destroying. It was that video of him at the WWE, and it had CNN plastered over it.
Yeah, and I'm like hitting it with a chair or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was so, that meme was apparently so powerful that CNN felt pretty threatened by it, and it's just some guy on the internet that had a little bit of editing software and skills, and he apparently really scared some powerful people. It's
Hmm.
pretty funny.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Like we have memes that people make of at work, right? So at my job, you do something, you'll end up getting a meme made of you. So one of my coworkers made a meme. I have a project I'm working on where it's called the Zombie Project, and so she photoshopped my face onto like one of the guys from the main guy from The Walking Dead. I don't know why I can't think of his name. The sheriff guy. Photoshop my face onto him and like put me with a background of a bunch of zombies, and I'm like, oh my god. And it's now on the wall in office for everybody to see.
Yeah, it's so much fun to do stuff like that. But yeah, so let's talk about like so you felt the importance of getting involved in the political process, and um, what does the Arizona Libertarian Party do here in Arizona?
Sure. So our main goal is obviously to win elections and run candidates and spread the message of liberty, excuse me. You know, it's made difficult. You know, we have roadblocks, there's legislation that's put in our way, there's fundraising issues, there's tons of things that happen. There's, you know, just a bandwidth of volunteers or the number of volunteers that are always obstacles that we have to overcome. We're working on those. Every election cycle is different. It's a constant evolving process. Laws change every cycle, and so it's just things you have to learn and do differently and grow from. Our mission right now is, you know, we were lucky enough in 2020 we grew from 32,000 registered libertarians to over 38,000 registered libertarians, and so we've seen tremendous growth over the past year. So we know that the message is resonating. We hope we continue that trend. You know, if we could grow by 17% every year, I don't have to probably explain compound interest to you, but I mean that, you know, that it's the same concept. If we could grow by 17% every year, we would be a real political force. And already legislatures across the country are changing election laws to try and keep us off the ballot. They've done it here in Arizona in 2015. They're doing it now in Indiana because of the success of their the gubernatorial candidate in Indiana.
Yeah, I saw that, and I've been hearing that. I was just listening to an interview that you were in, where you were talking about how the Republican Party took or made it pretty much impossible for you to be on the ballot when you ran in 2016.
Mhm.
What happened with that?
So what had happened is in 2014 there was a congressional race between the duopoly candidates, was Kirsten Sinema, and I honestly don't recall who the Republican is because they lost. So who cares? Um, but there was a libertarian in that race, Pal Gamble, who covered the gap, the spread between those two, and the Republican Party assumed that, wrongfully so, that if our candidate wasn't on the ballot, that every single one of his votes would have gone to their candidate and they would have won that congressional seat. Well, first of all, that's not true. That's, you know, most libertarians, if they didn't have a libertarian to vote for, they wouldn't vote. But it's very presumptive of them to assume that they would have voted for him anyways. Maybe they would have voted for Sinema. I don't know. I don't know what was in the hearts of all of those voters. What happened from that is because the Republican Party was so upset in 2015, they changed the law here in Arizona about how our signature, how many signatures we have to gather is changed, how they calculate the number. It used to be 0.5% of your party's registration in that district. So in my district, I live in the Levine area, and I currently have about 617 or so. I don't know how the current numbers in front of me, but you know, I have about 617 um, uh, registered libertarians. So it's a very low threshold if I had to get 0.5% of our party to get on the ballot. The same as it's a very low threshold and very easy threshold for Democrats or Republicans to get access to the ballot. Well, they changed how they calculate that number, and what they did is they started including independents. Now, independents in my district are actually the second largest voting group. It would be Democrats and then independents and then Republicans and libertarians. And so what that did is it effectively increased my signature requirements from 3 or 13 or whatever, the low number would have been. And it raised it to 174 or 176, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it just increased it by 20x, right? And they did that intentionally because it made it a much harder for us to get access to. But it also didn't really affect the Republicans or Democratic parties very much. It solely was planned and executed to affect our party and keep us off the ballot. And that's largely what's happened. We have not been able to get a partisan office on the ballot, mostly because of signature requirements. But even in cases where we have met the signature requirements, in 2018, we had a gubernatorial candidate, Kevin McCormick, who reached the signature requirements, and he was sued off the ballot by none other than the Arizona GOP chairman, Jonathan Lyons, at the time. Now, he's not the chairman anymore. So yeah, I mean, they will fight dirty. They will do anything they can to keep you off the ballot. We sued for relief in that case to try and keep our candidates on the ballot. That case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And of course, like is typical, the Supreme Court refused to hear a ballot access case based on a third party. And they have not heard a ballot access case from a third party now for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's becoming apparent to people is how we have a really cool and interesting system in regards to like the checks and balances and the way that it works. Like, at the time of our country's founding, it was a very revolutionary idea, moving away from monarchy and, really allowing for a better governance model that was more empowering to people. But, it seems like we've just kind of devolved into a system that is an oligarchy, where it's ran by like some people sitting in a smoke filled room behind closed doors wearing suits, and really just screwing over the little guy, and that's apparent. Like that's a story that kind of like feeds a narrative like that of like there's these powerful parties trying to eliminate competition. You see that with big tech. You see that, pretty much everywhere you look right now, Wall Street. And it's really frustrating for people. I think people feel really disenfranchised as a result of that. And, the Supreme, I like Murray Rothbard a lot. He's one of my favorites. But he describes in his book, The Anatomy of the State, as the courts essentially being like a self-refereeing mechanism where you have, these, they're a part of government, and so like the Supreme Court just taking a case like that and throwing it out, it's kind of like there's the people playing against the government in this scenario. And they're the ones refereeing the game. And it's just unfair.
Right. Yeah. Imagine if, the Super Bowl's coming up, right? So imagine if the referees wore jerseys for one of the teams. And that's exactly what happens in our court systems. Is they're political appointees is basically what they are. They've scratched enough backs and they have the right ideology, and they are good enough that they can pass off to be elected or appointed to those positions, right? And that's largely what we have is we don't have a system where the judges are actually fighting for what's best for the country or what's the fairest choice to make or decision to make. They're there to protect their own political interests of their own parties, that they're the jerseys that they're wearing, if you would. And it's the same thing. Like you said, you see it in every market. It's the same. It's no different than seeing Budweiser and Coors and Miller Lite and everybody else buying up all these small breweries, right? You see that all the time, so that they have more shelf space. As long as they can get their products there, they can push out the competition. And it's the same. It works the very same way in politics. They have stacked the deck in their favor. They have changed laws and built laws and worded them in ways to make it seem fair. But really, the effect of them is that it benefits their own, the duopoly, right? Those old parties.
Yeah, it's really, demoralizing, I think is the best word. So, what do people do with that? You realize that we're playing a rigged game, and we're the losers in this situation. Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, it is demoralizing. I've run for office enough times. I've been on, I've run for office now 4 times myself, for state house and for most recently the city of Phoenix City Council. And it is hard. You're fighting against an establishment machine that's there to protect its own interest. And really, you have 2 options. You can, you have a lot of people who have libertarian ideology, and you probably see this a lot in the Bitcoin community, where they don't trust government and they don't want government involved in their life, right? You get a lot of that, but they're not willing to vote, and they're not willing to get active, and they're not willing to participate. And I understand the frustration. I understand where they come from with that. The problem is politics is not going to let up on you. Right? You can't just opt out of everything. They're going to change the laws. They're going to eventually affect you in some way. And so, I can't in my own conscience leave a world where I didn't fight for what I believe in. And if I left this world and it was worse off, I could at least say, well, at least I fucking tried. I don't want, I have a daughter, and I don't want to leave a world that's worse off than the one I came into. Just the same way I wouldn't want to leave anything, anytime I step into a situation, I wouldn't want it to be worse off because I was there. And I feel the same way about, our government and the way our world works and the way our world functions. It's very, I don't want to say disheartening, but it definitely is. It definitely is something that you have to be cognizant of. You're going to have ups and downs if you decide to get involved in politics in some way. You're going to have some crushing defeats. You're going to put hours and hours and hours into canvassing or stuffing envelopes or making phone calls for candidates or whatever your choice you're going to decide to do, whatever level you're going to decide, you're going to have disappointment. And it's no different than, getting broken up with or, being turned down for a promotion or a raise or something like that, where it really is a gut punch. In politics, though, you just have to get back up and keep going for it, because again, the machine's not going to give up on itself. And so, we'd like to say it's going to topple itself, but what we've seen is that they will do whatever they can to grasp at power and keep themselves in power as long as they can. And they will change laws. They will manipulate currencies. They will do whatever they can to stay in power.
Yeah. It's I mean, that's pretty inspiring to listen to. And I think one of the things that has been pretty groundbreaking this week is what's happened with Reddit, where people are starting to understand how much power that they actually do have to be able to create change. And there's going to be some major pushback against them. I think the SEC is going to get involved, and there's going to be, it's going to be a net negative for these guys on Reddit. But they literally took Wall Street and brought them to their knees, these powerful people managing billions of dollars. And it was just, when I think Wall Street Bets at the beginning of the week had like maybe 3 million people on it. And right now it's like something like 5 million people armed with $600 stimulus checks just clicking buy buttons on Robinhood.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, right? Like people are using, potentially, like you said, their stimulus checks, their $600 stimulus checks to buy, GameStop stocks or Blockbuster or whatever, whatever the thing is. What's interesting is that Robinhood is their main investor is it called Citadel
Hmm.
or Citadel, who who is the group that loaned the people who lost billions of dollars. They loaned them the money in order to buy those stocks to short it in the first place. And so Citadel really pushed and for speculation on my part, the accusation is that Citadel pressured Robinhood to stop them from trading GameStop stocks. And the truth, I mean, there's some truth to that, possibly. Who knows? There's a class action lawsuit that's being filed against them for that now, for for stopping trading. But and the truth is that the New York Stock Exchange themselves also, I believe, stopped trading on GameStop stock, I believe 9 times on Monday and 5 times on Tuesday. Maybe it's 7 and 5, but I think it was 9 and 5. And so, there was some volatility there that raised some red flags. And, that's going to happen when something happens like, as quickly as it did, right? When you have Redditors and it spreads like wildfire, and everybody wants to, everybody has FOMO about it. They don't want to miss out on, being part of something that's kind of historic, and it's really interesting. Curious to see what happens from it. Obviously there's the lawsuits in place. There was a lot of shutdowns that happened. They stopped trading and a bunch of other stuff. What people also don't realize is that when you buy and sell stocks, that a lot of those stocks don't even exist. You're borrowing them from people who actually own them to buy and sell them. So that was one of the biggest problems with this system that happened with GameStop, is they were shorting stocks that didn't even exist on the market to buy or sell. And so they had millions and millions of dollars of stocks that didn't exist, and people were trying to buy stocks that don't really truly exist. So it's just a very interesting system. I don't, it sounds like what is it where the banks can, they take a savings and they can loan it out 10x. What's I don't know why my mind.
Fractional reserve banking.
Fractional reserve bank. It's very similar to that, but with stocks. And so I think it's kind of telling to see how that could work potentially with banking, with like something like quantitative easing, or printing millions and billions of dollars. I think it could have a very similar effect that you see with the market. Now, I think you'd have to print like Zimbabwe for that to happen, with trillions of dollars in circulation. I think that would, you'd have to print a lot, but they are printing a lot. They have been printing a lot for 6 years or so. I'd have to look at those numbers exactly, but yeah, it's very interesting to see what's happening there. They're the other thing is when you sell a stock and you say, okay, I'm going to give you $70 for this stock, you get that money instantly, but technically that goes into it's like a middleman, right? So you have the buyer and the seller, and there's a third, they flow through. I don't know exactly I don't remember off the top of my head what they're called, but they basically regulate and say, okay, this guy has this money, this person is paying for it, and it's like a brokerage kind of thing, right? So if one party ends up going bankrupt during that transaction, that brokerage company covers the fees on it. So that was another reason why they stopped, because transactions were going so quickly that they just didn't have the funds to cover potential losses, right? So when they were buying stocks so quickly and selling so quickly, those brokerage firms weren't able to cover the potential losses if one party said, oh, we're bankrupt during it. So it's interesting. I'm curious to see how the fallout from it happens and what happens with it. It's definitely going to be something I'm following for the next couple months to see what happens with it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, and 600 or 5 million Redditors broke the system, and it kind of just shows how fragile it is. And it is a very weird system. Like, for one, there's no way to really ever prove that you have ownership over the stock. And you know what these hedge funds have been doing is the markets are just so heavily manipulated and distorted. It's hard to really know what's true. So like, you know, you talked a little bit about inflation right now. And like, if you go on the street and you ask the average person, like, have things gotten more expensive over the past 10 years? Is it harder to like make ends meet? Everybody will say yes. Like very few people will say no. Um, and you know, it's moving a lot quicker than what people say it is. And, you know, it's hard. Like one of the things that's come up this week that's been, um, I mean, it's pretty well known that precious metals are heavily distorted and suppressed market, you know, because gold and silver are some of the best things to measure inflation against, you know, because they're relatively scarce and, um, you know, you can physically own it. And yet, you know, these big banks like JP Morgan keep on suppressing the prices, and you know they got busted for it last year, um, and got slapped with a little fine. And so it's like really hard to measure. So if you take all the metrics, if you take CPI, which is a garbage metric, and you just say like, you know, this is what inflation is, like we're not experiencing inflation yet. The house prices are going through the roof, healthcare is going through the roof, education is going through the roof, daycare, you know, you name it. The things that people actually have to pay for are getting more expensive. It's kind of bad. Like,
I think that a part of that is I see it a lot of industries that are heavily regulated by government are um seeing, you know, high inflation rates, high increase in costs. Housing is manipulated by government um through zoning laws and other things like that. Like having tiny houses is becoming a lot of cities are cracking down on having tiny houses, which ultimately hurts you. You know, it's funny, we call it a tiny house, but like, you know, my grandma and my great grandma, you know, great grandparents in general would have just called those houses. You know, 1,000 square foot house, like that's what I grew up in until I was a teenager, right? We had a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, like 1,000 square foot house with a carport. You know, it's not, you know, now when you think of a house, you're thinking 4 or 5 bedrooms, you're thinking 2,000 plus square feet. You know, it's not the same as it was when our families um, were growing up. And I think part of that is, you know, we have a high standard of living here in the United States. So I think that's part of it. Like we like our space, we like our, you know, you know, I'm sure, you know, you have a podcast studio, or you know, I have a room up, you know, in my house where my gun safes are, and I reload ammo in it, right? Like that's not something that my grandfather would have had. I mean, he may have had a shed in the back. Um, so I think where we see the most inflation is where the government is involved the most. Education, obviously. I mean, gosh, you know, it's so funny to hear, the baby boomers talk about, oh, you know, you can work part time and afford college. The fuck you can. You know what I mean? It is expensive as shit, and they complain and bitch and moan about people with student loans. Well, guess what? You guys created an industry that's preys on young, um, impressionable people to take out tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I mean, they would be better off getting small business loans for 50 grand or whatever it is, versus taking out those student loans. I don't know of any measure that would say that they're going to be more or less successful doing one or the other. You know, I think it's a crapshoot. I think most people don't even work in the industry that they went to school for 4 years or 6 years or whatever their degrees in. So yeah, it's, you know, the government manipulates the market. You know, well, think of LASIK for a second, right? LASIK is not covered by your traditional medical care, right? Medical care has skyrocketed, um, you know, without question since Obamacare was passed, the Affordable Care Act, right? The Unaffordable Care Act passed, but LASIK has gotten so cheap. You can get LASIK for under $1,000 an eye, and you know, while normal healthcare and normal medicine is in skyrocketing prices, um, LASIK is dropping. dramatically and being better. So you're getting better quality, you're getting a better product cheaper than what you could 20 years ago. So it's interesting to see, how government involvement uh, can manipulate a market. And somebody who would be really good for you to talk to about medicine, if the medical field, if you were interested in it, is Dr. Kyle Varner. If you're interested in talking with him, I would be happy to introduce you guys, because he's a libertarian, and he does a lot of volunteer work in South America, or he did before COVID. um, and a wealth of knowledge, great libertarian guy. I like him a lot. Got to hang out with him several times, and he very much opposes government intervention in medicine, and is looking at ways to do things differently.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Yeah, that'd be great to connect with him sometime. A lot of people just don't have basic understandings of the way that markets work. And just to give like a brief rundown, is things are supposed to get less expensive over time as the technology gets better, and technology is obviously been getting a lot better. And a good example of this is Tesla, in the way that they become more efficient, and they start with these super high price premium vehicles, and they're working their way down to make consumer vehicles, and they're bringing everything more in-house. Or if you look at Amazon and the way that they're able to lower prices and make things a lot more affordable for people to get, inconvenient, because I mean, just to get like free deliveries to your house. I mean, if you look at like 10 years ago, how expensive it was to order things online, compared to, getting it like within a day for free, it's unbelievable. And that, for one, that's capitalism. And then two, and well, you can argue about that because we're not like really in a fully capitalist system, but that's just the way that technology works. It's deflationary. But the problem with that is it's the complete opposite of the system that we're in right now. We're in an inflationary system. So products like that are actually, very difficult for the central bankers to deal with and wrap their minds around. And it's yeah, it's kind of counter to what we have. And I think that's a big reason why we see, these massive rises and things like medical, like you were saying, medical care should be getting less expensive over time instead of more expensive. And, if you look at like the efficiencies that they have today, like if you go into an old medical records office, like 15 years ago, where everybody was having to sort through all the medical records on paper, and now, a doctor can just pull up a chart on a computer, and that's like,
Yeah, on a tablet. Yeah.
and so that's like the perfect example of like why costs should be lowering. But yeah, people don't realize that like government subsidies equal bad.
Yeah. Well, and here's one of the things is, when you go for a doctor's appointment, one of the things that like you don't even think about, but they have to do so much documentation, right, in order to get it through the insurance companies, because insurance are required to have so much, certain things reported, and so many questions asked, and they want to know, you know, stuff that's largely irrelevant to why you're visiting the doctor. And so now you have, right, so you have a doctor, and in that doctor you have a nurse and a nursing assistant and a front desk receptionist, and you have a billing specialist, and now you have a scribe, so that the scribe is going to be in the office taking notes with the doctor, so that the doctor can focus on the patient and not filling out paperwork the entire time. So now you've just added, they've added another layer in order to comply with some regulation from, either from the insurance companies or from government. And most things shit rolls downhill. It doesn't roll up. No doctor's like, oh, I want to hire more people and be more out of touch with my patients. That's not why most people are doctors. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to look at. And yeah, you're right. Like Amazon can offer free shipping on 2 day shipping on a lot of products because they have efficiencies, and they learned that people would buy from them more often if they can guarantee to get you a product in 2 or 3 days versus, waiting a week or even longer. So what do? You know, they've um, created warehouses all across the country that house the most common uh, um, bought items, right? That, you know, 100,000 items in those warehouses, and they've got the most common items there. Where I live, close to me, from where I live, there's 3 Amazon warehouses from me. Not quite that I could throw a stick at, you know, or a stone at, but within 10 miles, there's 3 Amazon warehouses. Um, you know, one's a returns warehouse, but the other two ship out. Um, Amazon recently launched their own delivery trucks, right? So now they're competing against FedEx, UPS, and USPS, and other delivery companies. Right now, UPS has their own. Why? Because it was cheaper for them. They understood that FedEx was going to charge them, um, you know, uh, X plus, 10%, where they could just pay X. And it's the same thing that oil barons, the oil barons realized when they realized that they could ship their oil cheaper if they owned their own rail lines. So it's the same thing we're dealing with today. And now Amazon's buying their own planes so that they can deliver their packages faster. So, they have an incentive based on earnings to do a better job for their customers and to do it cheaper so that they remain solvent. And we don't have that with government. You have so many inefficiencies in government because ultimately they can have shit customer service because you have no other option.
Yeah. Yeah, and it ensures jobs and it ensures power, and that's kind of the incentives in government. It seems like is power and job security. So
Yeah. Well, when if you had to dig a ditch, right? I've heard this analogy before. If you had to dig a ditch, if you wanted to do it efficiently, you would do it with a backhoe, right? If your goal was to hire people, you do it with spoons. You know, you dig that ditch with spoons instead of a backhoe because you realize that like you're trying to hire people, and that we had that happen in this country where during the Great Depression, the government literally would pay people to move rocks, move stacks and stacks of rocks out of riverbeds, and just waste millions of dollars for no reason. From what I can gather, why were they moving these rocks? I can't tell, but just that's the mindset you get from government. They can do something because they have the money and they want to do it. That's why we you know study the gender of frogs mating while high on marijuana, or something, some ridiculous study that nobody in their right mind would think to research, but we're going to pay $2.7 million for it.
yeah, yeah, and so yeah. As far as the Libertarian Party, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of disinformation and representation as far as, I think a lot of people would be surprised that a lot of people in the Libertarian Party are, like pro-gay marriage and different various ideas that are typically reserved for the Democratic Party or kind of the progressive sector. Wait, if you were to sum up what the Libertarian Party is about in just kind of a short spiel, what would you, how would you explain it?
The Libertarian Party, the best way to describe um it is focused on individual responsibility. We don't care if you are gay, straight, bi, trans. We don't give two shits what you identify as. We try to be respectful of how you want to be identified, obviously. But ultimately, we don't care how you identify or what you want, how you want to live your life, as long as it doesn't affect other people. Right. So we have in the Libertarian Party, we have what's called the non-aggression principle. And so, you don't, we call it the NAP, and you don't, you're not initiating violence against somebody. And that might be as simple as, you know, noise pollution or certain things like that, right? Don't be a dick to your neighbor. It's kind of what it is. And that's kind of the essence of the party um is having that personal responsibility to take care of yourself and be respectful of your neighbors, and to respect your neighbor's property and their wishes too. The Libertarian Party is very big on property rights. um there's some people that don't have some different ideas on property within the party, and that's fine. We can have those discussions, but largely the Libertarian Party respects property rights, and they push for individual responsibility.
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty simple and easy to say that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party do not respect property rights. And that's why we have things like civil asset forfeiture, where they can just take your stuff if they want to without any due process.
Yeah. I mean, that's a horrible process, right? There's, they seize your truck or they seize your laptop or whatever, and then they charge it. They charge a laptop with a crime. Like, your laptop did anything. It's an inanimate object. It has no, action that wasn't, it has no input. It has no output without inputs, right? Just like any computer. If you're gonna, you don't, a computer doesn't do anything by itself. You have to have inputs to it, and it runs a process and it spits out whatever that result is. And it's the same thing with computers or vehicles or whatever. A truck doesn't, whatever, it, if it's drugs, right? Because it almost always leads back to the war on drugs, right? Um, trucks don't they haul they may haul a drug, but they're just a means of getting it done, right? They're an efficient way to get it done. The person driving that vehicle is the one doing it, and of course, drugs shouldn't even be illegal in the first place. You should be able to do whatever drug you want. And I say that as somebody who's never done anything more than some mild painkillers when I was in my early 20s, but not recreationally. Yeah, the Republican Party campaigns like they're libertarians and governs like Democrats, and the Democrat Party is no different. They campaign and go through their primaries like they're progressive socialist, and then when they get to the primaries, or when they get to the general elections, they try to get as moderate as possible. And the success of I hate to say legalization of gay marriage, but the recognition of marriage equality is what I would probably call it, was championed by libertarians and has been. It didn't become a popular idea for Democrats to believe in marriage equality until 2008, when Barack Obama took office. So for them to sit there and wave a victory flag like that was a big victory for them, it's not. That was a victory for libertarians. And it's the same way when this drug war is about to end, as now we have recreational marijuana usage here in the state of Arizona. That's not a win for Democrats. We have two people sitting in the White House who have probably been some of the biggest culprits of locking up minorities for minor drug possession in the country. Don't sit there and pretend. They cannot sit there and pretend like it is their victory. It is a libertarian victory. Libertarians may not necessarily be winning at the ballot box, but we are definitely winning in the culture war.
Yeah, I think that's huge, and I'm a very libertarian minded person, and have been for a bit, especially when I learned about economics. I think I grew up kind of progressive, moved out to Arizona, became a Republican, because I liked guns and whatever, and then really saw through just the sham, which is what you've been calling the duopoly party system. But yeah, I mean, letting people do what they want, not putting people in prison for victimless crimes, and those are very progressive ideas, in this day and age. But yeah, I mean, The idea of personal responsibility is huge, and I think it's I think part of the reason why we're seeing kind of a move away from it and a demand of government is because people are being disempowered, and we're watching the growth of government happen a lot of it. I had Charles Heller on last week, and he was talking about kind of the destruction of the American family structure, and that takes a lot away from the um, individual, uh, responsibility that's really driven into us. Because like if you look at the war on drugs, it's destroyed families. If you
Hmm.
look at like what's happened to us economically, it's destroyed families. Like the millennial generation, we can't afford houses, we can't afford to raise kids, and um and that really takes away. And you have somebody coming in that has the media as um you know their voice, champion whatever their ideas are, and they blame somebody else and are like, give me more power to fix your problems that we created, and people are like, yeah, that sounds great, like we need these things changed. And
Yeah, I see what I definitely agree with a lot of those points. I do think the government creates a lot of the problems that they seek to fix, and that they tried to fix was created by them in the first place. And we see that especially with something like Flint. They created the problem, and now they still don't have clean water. Um, you know, we can spend trillions of dollars overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan, and send millions and millions of dollars overseas to Israel or Pakistan or any of these other countries. But goddamn, like, these people in Flint, Michigan, are still without clean drinking water. Like, ultimately, I want there to be a free market solution to that. But in the meantime, like, we have the system we have. Um, you know, if I could snap my fingers, I'd make a lot of changes. Would those changes be as great as I hope they are? I certainly hope so. That's what I'm fighting for. That's what a lot of libertarians across this country are fighting for, is for our ideas to be implemented in public policy. And I think uh, you know I you made a point, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but um, I just think the way that we've been governing for the past years has led to the nanny state, right, where you're so used to government taking care of you and you're not having to struggle. um, Man, I've never once been on an unemployment in my life, and I've been, since I graduated from college 9 years ago, I have been unemployed for over 2 years. you know you know through stretches, right, 6 months here, 6 months there. And so it's really, not that I wouldn't if I had to, because definitely I'm going to feed my family before my family starves, right? But man, that would be such a hit to my own pride to have to go and take a government handout. And not that I'm a caring person. I really try to see the best in people, even when they may not deserve it. I don't want to see people suffer, and I don't want to see people be hurt, but I don't see the government's solution as actually helping. I see it as you know perpetuating the situation, and making it last longer than it has to. And we see that now with current lockdowns and everything else, where we've lost about 700,000 small businesses in this country because of these lockdowns, and that's an income that people have lost, that they, a life's work that they've lost, or a family business that they've lost, that they may never be able to get to rebuild. And we have seen record profits going to the wealthiest people in this country. And I find it really interesting that when Donald Trump was president, we had a Democratic Party who was very fiercely against the two martini lunch, right? They were very big. They were against big business, and they were really anti-business, and advocated for these things that would hurt businesses, small businesses, not the large ones. And what's happened is we've had lockdowns all across the country at the state level that have affected small business. And it's led to the rich being richer. Like, I mean, the richest man on earth now is owns Amazon, and he ships products all across this country. And I think he's done some, that's, I'm not trying to talk badly of him, because I think Elon or any of these guys have done some great things, and they've done some innovative things, but they rely heavily on basically having a monopoly. They rely heavily on government to um, passing government regulation to keep the the barrier to entry to compete against them high. And we had spoken prior to getting online. We talked a little bit about censorship on the internet, and I don't see how if it I don't want to see censorship on the internet. I don't want to see Facebook deciding who can get what can get posted and what can't. My worry is that we either have to treat things like Facebook and other social media sites, Twitter and such, like utilities, where they can't discriminate and they can't choose and they can't pick sides, and which essentially gives them a monopoly, or you know under current law. We either have to figure out a balance between, are they a utility that can't discriminate and can't choose and pick and say no to customers, or consumers. And I shouldn't say customers, I should say consumers. Or do we treat them like private businesses that are allowed, and should have that choice, and should have that operation, the discretion who they want their customers to be. I don't think in this age that, like, I don't think you can function as a business without having some presence on social media. So I struggle with that, myself, of how we should treat something like Facebook or Twitter or any of those other platforms, in this day and age, based on those factors.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think, like, looking back at history, one of the most monumental points in history was the advent of the printing press, and how that really dispersed knowledge in a way that was never possible before, and led to the Enlightenment and eventually the Industrial Revolution. And the internet in a lot of ways is disruptive like that. And again, Reddit, perfect example, or WikiLeaks, or the Silk Road. All of these stories of things radically being changed, or like the memes that just killed Hillary's campaign. Well, that was WikiLeaks too, but um, uh, but you just like look at the way that these things are disruptive, and I think that it'll be a hard fought battle, to get there and really improve. But can be one that is won, because, like, if you look at, like, the Gutenberg printing press, like, Gutenberg was printing out Bibles too, and those were heavily suppressed by the Catholic Church. And that was a very underground movement that was not inherently wrong, was definitely morally right. It was bringing people closer into having their own experience with God. And I think we're seeing that today, in a lot of regards. And
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't really thought about that point in a long time. But yeah, you're right. The printing press, prior to the printing press, reading was, the ability to be illiterate and be able to read was rare. And so, you were a higher class, considered to be a higher class, or a, you like a higher, I don't want to say like higher being. That makes it sound like they're gods on earth. But you were seen as different. It was a distinguishing feature to have, to be able to read and write. Right? Not everybody, not the common person, was able to read and write. So it was reserved for the political elite, the clergy, probably some more well-off to do merchants. So that's definitely an interesting thing to think about, and of how the printing press changed the world, and how the internet is changing the world now, like you said. The Silk Road, or any of these other things. Free Ross, by the way. Like, what a fucking crock of shit that is.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the internet is a huge thing. It's not, God, I can't believe that people thought at one point that the internet would go away once it was unleashed. It's not as, unfortunately, Al Gore was wrong, and it's not a series of tubes. Um, and it's revolutionized the way that so many industries operate and function. It's The internet's never going to go away. It's evolving even to this day. I mean, just think about it, thinking about cell phone. I was marveling a couple years ago. I was working in a bottling factory at the time. I was working as the supervisor for a bottling plant, and I was marveling at how I was able to download an hour and a half long podcast to my phone with no wires attached to it in like 3 minutes. And I just like it. I just thought, like, what a freaking time to be alive, to be able to accomplish that and have this, my cell phone in my pocket that I could search through anything and do so much with. And it's just, the internet is such a fascinating thing. The world will never be the same after the internet. There's no way it will be.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I think that's what Bitcoin is. And I think the lesson to be taken away, if you really look at history, is that there's always going to be a battle between the established order and other people looking for something that's different or better. And I mean, you look at Galileo. And just, I mean, there's so many different examples of that, of like, people just pushing back against things that were inherently good. And I think it's really important, and trying to get the message out there that like people have power, they have personal responsibility. Like, we are responsible for the things happening in our community, in our lives, in our families' lives. And we have to do things. It doesn't mean like going and doing stupid stuff like storming the Capitol. Like, that wasn't a solution. It wasn't effective. It wasn't, good at all. But like, doing stuff like you're doing, with getting involved in a political party that isn't corrupted in the same way that the Democratic and Republican parties are. And like, yeah. So um it is an exciting time. I mean, we're in a time of great upheaval, and we have the ability to like really leave our mark on history, if we don't just sit by in apathy and watch Netflix all day. But
Yeah. I agree with that. I think 2020, that time between, September, when we had those fires in Australia, and all throughout 2020 into, the storming of the Capitol, and on the 6th. A lot of that time is gonna be, thinking about it in a decade from now when it's in a history book, right? How's it going to be written? And I really hope, so I had the okay, so for some some reference, I was lucky enough, and we have an organization here in Phoenix that focuses on having civil conversations about tough topics, right? And so we just had a meeting. There was 20 of us or so that met for dinner and had a couple cocktails and stuff like that, and we got to have a conversation and talk about riots. And what is a what when does a peaceful protest become a riot, right? When does are riots justified even? And we had some conversations about the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer, and what happened um with those protests. And we had the same conversation about the events that happened on January 6th, and if those events were a riot, or if you would consider those a riot, or if you would consider that a peaceful protest. And I think it really opened up my eyes about, you know, um, you know, can you have violence at a peaceful protest? Absolutely. I think you can. I think that you're when you have a large gathering like that, there's always going to be a riled up um group of folks that are not, that don't think clearly, that don't act rationally. And I don't think it's fair to classify an entire movement or an entire thing based on the actions of a small minority. And so, we had one person who had said, I have some friends that were at the events on January 6th, and they were being called terrorists, but they didn't even know what was happening at the Capitol. And, I started thinking about that, and I don't know exactly off the top of my head how many people were at the Capitol that day, but I I see that. I understand that now, a little bit better. That, yeah, it was a small group of people that ultimately stormed that Capitol, and that group of people should be called, terrorist or whatever. I think terrorist is a little overused in today's vernacular, personally. Same with communists or socialists or Nazis or anything like that. All those things that are now used as pejoratives, I think, are overused. So they're losing their meaning, personally. But I started thinking about that in context to a lot of the BLM movements, and how I felt about um, how relatively, compared to the number of people who participated in those protests, how many of those people participated in destruction of private property. Now, I'm talking specifically about private property, not public property. I don't give two fucks about you lighting a police department on fire. Who gives a fuck? Um, but the destruction of private property is something that I think really tarnished that movement, and unfortunately, will leave a negative impact, leads to a lot of negative connotations about those events. I largely agree with what the Black Lives Matter protests were about. Personally, I a little bit about my history. I used to be a military police officer. When I was in the army, I was a military police officer. I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice and criminology, and I became a libertarian in college and decided that I could not be a part of that system. And so I had to change and figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I just see, a lot of um, unfortunate events and things taken out of context, and people jumping to conclusions about things that they don't really know about. I don't know, obviously there was people that were upset that were at the events on January 6th that had no part in storming the Capitol. And I get it. If you're angry about something, yeah, you should absolutely air your grievances. You should wave your flags, and you should flip some middle fingers towards some government officials, because fuck those bastards. But ultimately, like, choosing to storm a Capitol and threatening to kill people, I think that pushes over the line, right? Like, I think there's a time for that. I don't think we're at that time. Um, hopefully we don't get to where we're past where we can affect change. I really am hoping the next couple of years that the rhetoric and um the buildup and the divisiveness that are in politics can go away, that have been built up over the last 4 years, unfortunately, under President Trump. I'm hoping those can go away. um I really do, because it's hard to have a civil conversation with people now about politics and about policy, um, members of the public, right? Like, you can have, most politicians are level-headed enough, even on the state and local level, that you can have a conversation with them, even if it doesn't make any progress. But man, you get people so riled up on social media that um, you can't have a conversation, and you can't try to change somebody's mind. You can't have somebody look at something from a different perspective, because they're so stuck on, you're the enemy, and I don't give two shits what they say, because they don't know who you are. You're hiding behind a profile on the internet, rather than being a person in public, right? It's so much different arguing over the internet versus sitting at a table, sharing a drink at a table with somebody and having a conversation about, what this uh what this event means, or what, how people felt about, X, Y, or Z. So I think it's important, and um the landscape of that can changes. But still, at the same time, fuck the duopoly. But at the same time, like, I have a lot of respect for people within those parties, um that are, at least able to not sit on the fence. But I do hope that we can get to where we can start having a lot of conversations like we're having today. I think we agree on a lot of things. I don't, we don't know each other enough to know that we agree on everything, but having more dialogue that's centered around understanding and trying to be open to what's going on. I think that's going to be something great that we hopefully can start working towards in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. I think for people listening, that's probably going to be a breath of fresh air. With the polarization that people are seeing, like people want stability, they want sanity. They don't like. I mean, we're naturally drawn to this like hyperbolic craziness, and that's what social media really is like built to like promote, and
Right. Yeah.
and we kind of fall into it. There's just outrage culture pretty much, or like people just gearing up for war on Twitter or whatever. But I've had a lot of people on the podcast that are from all sorts of different backgrounds that have been able to change my mind on things. And I think, the types of conversations like these are so important because, people have different perspectives. They have different understandings of things. They might have better information than, you might have better information on a topic than I do. And so it's important for us to be able to listen and to grow with it. And that doesn't necessarily mean like giving up your values, because everybody has different values. And I think that's important to stick to those. But, so many things have changed, in my opinion, over the last few years of just like learning, like, because, but, I really appreciate you coming on. What are some good places, like if somebody was going to get hooked up with the Libertarian Party in Arizona, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. So the best place to get a hold of the Libertarian Party would be our website, azlp.org. Of course, we are on Facebook. We're working on, spreading our wings into other platforms. We just are lucky enough to have somebody who was working on the Joe Jorgensen campaign here locally, who we is probably going to be very active on helping us with our social media, because that's what she helped with for that campaign. And so we're really thankful for her name's Lauren. And so, thank you, Lauren, for volunteering and doing that work, because I am not a social media expert at all. I've been banned from Facebook myself, and I'm on my second profile. So don't do what I do. And by the way, I got banned for like commenting on like Taco Bell tacos. like that's really what I got banned over. So sometimes it can be a little bit ridiculous. But azlp.org, find us on Facebook, Arizona Libertarian Party. We do have a group and a page. The group allows a little bit more discussion and openness, and to have those policy type questions. And we do have monthly meetings that are open to the public. I don't have a link that I can say go to here, but if you follow our social media, you'll see those posted. We try to be as open and as possible about what's going on. There's certain things that we can't disclose everything, but we try to be as open and transparent as we possibly can with everybody. And ultimately, the thing that you guys need to realize is, if you are a libertarian, we might be classified as like the leaders of the organization, right? But what people don't realize is that while you might be the leader of the organization, and you might be seen as a leader in the organization, really your job is to fulfill the wishes of the people who you represent. And so the way I look at that is how if you don't like the way something's happening, if you don't like the way that we're messaging, help us. We may ultimately disagree and not agree on it at all, but if you're just going to sit there and be angry and type away on your computer rather than getting involved, are you helping? Because everybody is going to be marketed to a little bit differently. Everybody's going to see things a little bit from a little bit different perspective, and so we're open to those conversations and to having people involved. And yeah, I think that's generally it. Or nationally, the lp.org is the national party's website. I happen to also be the assistant treasurer for the national party. So yeah, definitely go to lp.org, and there's a membership there. It's $25 a year for the basic level of membership, and that kind of lets us know that, hey, we're first of all, it helps us with things like ballot access lawsuits, right? So we generally spend about $1 million every 4 years. Over the course of 4 years, we spend about $1 million fighting for ballot access in different states and circulating petitions and things like that. So the $25 really helps get gets clipboards in activist hands and gets them knocking on doors to try and get candidates on ballots, and B, try to fight against laws that are used to unjustly keep us off the ballot.
Yeah, that's huge, and I'll definitely be subscribing to that after this. And yeah, again, people underestimate the power of what they can do with their money. Money is their voice, and you can put your stimulus check into GameStop, or you can put it into things that you believe in. And where are some good places that people can follow your work personally?
When I lost my main account, I lost my public profile page, and I haven't created another one. Just it happened in September, and so that was right before the election, and so we went literally from election to from the election into our county party stuff and into the state party stuff. So I probably will end up having making a public profile page again. I don't know, I just haven't done it yet. Been a little sidetracked with all the financial reports I have to file. I actually have to file one tonight. So yeah, you can follow me on Facebook. Just look me up, Robert Allen Pepiton. If you find me on there, I probably will end up making a separate page just for so I can kind of have some separation, and hopefully I don't lose my public profile page again, because unfortunately when that happened, I lost pictures of my daughter at Halloween and things like that. So I'll have to do that at some point, but for now you can just follow my Facebook page.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for doing. Real quick, one last question: any predictions for season 3 of The Mandalorian?
Oh man, oh gosh. I'm hoping that they chronologically, I'm trying to think of where they left off. I don't know how, are you big into Star Wars yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of this is after all of the events of Darth Vader and all that jazz. So we're 20 years past that time or so, roughly. I'm hoping we get to see some other Jedis come about, but I don't know that they're gonna focus much on the Jedis and the Mandalorian. They've got 6 different shows that they're coming out, or 7 different shows, and so it's an exciting time to be a Star Wars fan. My wife and I were I get bonuses at work, performance bonuses and stuff like that, and we were going to buy lightsabers, like dueling lightsabers that we could actually fight with, just kind of nerding out on it. I would like to see them introduce some of the other Jedis that are, but I don't know that they will. I think they're going to stick to the Mandalorian story. Maybe they'll end up, I'm curious to see what they do with the dark saber and all that jazz too. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to make any predictions particular, because I don't know. I like to be surprised, and like to see, I want to see what John Favreau does with it. I've liked a lot of his work. I like him as a person. I find him very personable. Totally would drink beers and shoot tequila with that guy if I could,
Yeah, it's seeing Luke Skywalker at the end of that, it was just such a great ending to such a terrible year. Um, so it was definitely a pick me up for me. But yeah, well, I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Yeah. I'd like to stay in touch with you. I really appreciate you having me and spending, allowing me to talk and have a conversation with you.
Sure. That was a really fun conversation with Robert Allen Pepiton. Man, he's definitely like, these are the types of conversations I like having because they're inspiring. He's a person with a vision, that really is willing to take a beating for a cause that he believes in. And when I say that, he described how demoralizing it is to just watch these unfair obstacles placed in your path, when all you're trying to do is really have a voice in the political process. And, it's one thing if it was a fair election process, where the rules and barriers to entry were equal, but it's not. And he explained how that is. But yeah, I'm guilty of being pretty apathetic when it comes to politics. And, that's one of the things why I feel so passionate about Bitcoin, is because, we really have a way to create a change in our monetary system. And I see it as a technology that really has power to change people's lives in our communities, where people can get off of zero and start building wealth and protecting the value that they create. And he has a very similar, idea of like why politics are important for him, that people can actually be represented by, people that actually have their best interests in mind, and that, the government can get back to a place of where it should be, where it's subservient to the people instead of the people being subservient to it. And yeah, I mean, it was inspiring, definitely. I feel like I need to get more involved in the political aspect of things. And I mean, the first thing I did was I went and joined the Libertarian Party and donated the money, a very small amount, $25, and yeah, and that's cool, and hopefully can be more involved in the future. But that being said, if you're still listening, make sure to get to your local Bitcoin meetup. Meet some local Bitcoiners, get excited, look for solutions and how you can change your community. Really excited about what's happening here in Arizona and in Tucson. We just had our first Bitcoin meetup. Great conversation. It was on Zoom. We're hopefully going to be in person sooner or later. And yeah, there's some great stuff happening up in Phoenix, so I'll keep you posted on that. And thanks for listening.